Bandwidth for First Updates Now is supported by the Blue Alliance. Keep up to date on all live and archived First Robotics events and team stats at thebluealliance.com.
People are interested. But you know what? If you send me an email, you'll get a response, and it will be from me.
And I really don't have any desire to.
You haven't watched the trailer at all?
No.
A lot of people haven't heard of the couch division, so
It's a comfy division to be in, though.
it's super comfy. It's almost too comfy at times.
Your response to teams who see that as a new potential issue with districts?
Yeah, that's really a two-pronged question.
Let's see if there's any damage from that fall. There was. They snapped. 330. Still on their back. 6 seconds to go.
4 was the highest rank, but then as votes continue to pour in, everything kind of changed around a little bit. So we forget about that.
First Updates Now is brought to you by Twitch. Fun is now a Twitch partner and offering some awesome subscriber-only benefits. Subscribe today or get a free subscription each month when you have Amazon Prime by linking your account and clicking subscribe. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of First Help Now, where we are here to answer your questions to improve your FRC team. Filling in for Libby Kamen, who's feeling ill tonight, I'm Tyler Olds, and I'm very excited to introduce your co-host for First Updates Now. Please welcome in Mike Heimlich. Mike, why don't you tell everybody a little about yourself and what you're doing from down under?
All right, well, I'm lead mentor of Team 3132. We've been here for about, this is our 8th season. Originally, I was with 2342 out of Nashua, New Hampshire, and my family and I moved over to Australia about, 8 years ago and started the team, and things have really taken off down here.
Awesome. You know, I didn't ask you. It is Heimlich, right? Am I pronouncing that correct?
It is Heimlich. Doing great.
Just want to make sure. Just a reminder for any of other hosts or guests, we make sure you please have your Twitch muted because we can hear feedback through that. So in First Help Now, we're going to start off with discussions of the week and transition to some questions that you submitted through First Help Now and even take a caller today. But before we do that, Mike, why don't you introduce our guest for today's show?
Yeah, today we have a real treat for everybody from Citrus Circuits, Davis, California. Steve Harvey's on with us. Steve brings a huge amount of experience, and he's just a really fun guy to hang out with.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And thanks for telling me I'm a fun guy to hang out with. Not all my students say that. So.
Well, if any of them doubt it, send them to me and we'll shore it up for you.
You're actually bona fide fun because you're on fun right now.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Are we going to start with the bad puns?
Yeah, right, I've gotten used to the fun ones already. So, all right, let's hop into our discussion of the week, which has to do with the lift peg on the airship. This is a device that teams place gears on. If you're not familiar, by the way, and we do welcome in the Twitch community, we're talking about First Robotics competition. And down below, you can actually get a link to what the game animation is and see what we're talking a little bit about. So we're going to be talking about the lift peg. And there's been a concern in the FRC community over the robustness of this and if it might break during play. So, guys, if First were to consider an alternative to the McMaster car spring, what would you propose that could make events run more smoothly? And I'm just going to preface saying, if you think about last year, where sometimes we had to wait a long time to get things back in place and back running, what would you propose to make sure that things run smoothly at a first event for that?
Well, I guess I'll jump in on that one first, and then see if Steve disagrees with me at all. I guess the main thing is, when you're at a regional event, you want things to flow pretty smoothly. You want the matches to tick over as you expect because you're trying to make repairs in the pit or you're planning the rest of your day. So I think the top line item is that whatever they decide to do, we need to ensure that the matches just happen like they should happen. So whether it's a stiffer spring or some more solid material, I think the primary thing that they have to go for is to ensure that the flow of the game continues on. Because you're absolutely right, Tyler. Last year, some of the field damage that was experienced, we had long delays in getting the field repaired. So I think there's ample body of evidence to suggest that we need to do something that's very manageable from the overall regional or divisional play perspective. Steve, what do you think?
Well, I honestly haven't heard about this, so I don't know how to comment on the robustness of the current design. What I can say is that, you know, along with many other teams, I'm sure we're all prototyping based on that current design, and we're allowing for that flexibility of the spring and all the other the aspects of the way it's designed. So if something was different, if something was changed, it was stiffer, I don't know, mounted in a different way, more obstruction to the robot, that might actually have, you may actually have to change your robot.
Yeah, it could be a detriment. Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to, honestly, at this point, I wouldn't want to see the actual design changed. Just make it maybe more robust if there's a problem.
Mike, if I can ask you, what from your guys' end, because I'm not currently active on a team this year. What is the main concern from you guys? Like, what have you noticed with the spring that brings up this concern?
Yeah, so if you look at the specs on the spring, there's I think it's a 70-pound plastic deformation limit on the spring. So if you were to get that spring caught in your robot, or if anybody were to get the spring caught in the robot, you pull back with more than 70 pounds of force, you're going to get the spring to plastically deform. Then you'll have sort of a loose, floppy spring there. That's definitely going to disrupt the flow of the game from that point on. And like to my earlier point, the issue that you're going to have is that that's going to take time to replace. And how quickly can they get them replaced, and how many springs they're going to run through. Because, when you're talking about a 120-pound robot, 140 pounds when you throw on bumpers and battery, it's quite possible, more than quite possible, that there's a lot of springs that are going to get deformed as teams pull away from them. Students excited about getting that cycle time down, they're going to pull the sticks back and get a whole lot of force on that spring. And if it gets caught in the machine, one of the fears is you'll see a lot of damaged or bent springs, which will put that alliance at a disadvantage for the rest of that match.
So let me ask, from a field perspective, I'm not sure if either one of you have seen an official field, because I haven't yet, but I wonder what the replacement time. So let's say they do determine that the spring is too deformed or something like that, like a head referee looks at it and says, okay, this is not appropriate to be on the field still. Do either one of you know what the change out time would be to modify or adjust one of those? Or to put
I don't.
The field drawings show a shaft collar that's just clamped onto the edge of the spring, right? The end of the spring where it goes over the device that it's attached to. So it seems to me that it would just be a matter of taking off that shaft collar, putting a new spring on, and clamping the new shaft collar on it. Doesn't seem like that'd be a big change out.
Yeah, so I gotta say then, I guess in my opinion, if it is a quick change, as long as First has enough spare springs available, I don't see that being too big of a deal potentially. The one thing I could see though is if it is too many, like if you remember last year with the CDF, for example, where that had to be replaced, there was a mechanism or a part that had to be replaced several times that they might have to change something. I think that will probably be the only instance that you see that changed, is if First determines they have to change it too many times, and it just is becoming a detriment to them.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you, Tyler. Well, it would be unfortunate, I guess, if that spring gets bent out of shape too easily, and then some teams suffer in their matches. But eventually, if it happens every few matches, eventually the field personnel are going to run out of replacements.
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe we can bring our own spring.
There you go.
Bring our own rope, bring our own spray.
Yes, that will be one per alliance, right, or one per team.
Everybody contributes.
And then if it breaks, it's your problem, just like with the rope.
Yeah, and Caltran in chat pointed out something interesting too, that multiple damage springs could be called G15 and get your robot re-inspected potentially too. So I wonder if that happens and it's really, the spring is having issues and not the robot, but I could see that being lost in translation a little bit, where the robots end up getting re-inspected and they say, no, you can't interact with the spring anymore, even though it is possibly a crappy spring that's gone bad after a while.
Yeah, and I think the spring also underlines one of the issues, at least for international events like Israel, Australia, and China, is we don't have a onshore source of those springs, so we're severely limited by those in the short run, and that's going to just compound the problem here, make those events run smoothly.
Sure. All right. Anything else on this subject at all?
No, I think we beat the dead horse.
And one of the things, chat, that we're trying with this is we're going to try to get more of an international appearance in these shows. A lot of our other First Updates Now shows have been very North American based. So we're going to be, as we go through these shows that we're running and the pilots that we're having for this, we're going to be reaching out to different teams and different people from different countries. And we'll actually meet one of them in just a little bit from Australia as well. But now it is time to take questions submitted by Fun Nation and to First Help Now. Please keep in mind that First Help Now is not official, neither is Fun, an official Q&A. So our answers are our own. It's like Chief Delphi, right? It can be really good advice, but it is not the Q&A. Keep that in mind. Make sure you do your research and making smart decisions for your team. And if you're interested, though, in calling in or submitting your question, you can send an email to frchelpnow@gmail.com, or you can tag at First Updates Now if you're watching live, and we'll answer pretty much any of your questions that we have at the end of the show. So let's start out with some team organization questions. This question was submitted to First Help Now, and Steve, I'll have you answer first. What is the process you take to select your chairman's presenters? And if you don't mind going just a little bit in depth on your chairman's process.
Yeah, okay. Well, we've only been doing chairmans for the last 3 years, actually. So we're fairly new to the process. Mike actually might have more input than we do. And I'll be honest, initially, there wasn't a lot of interest from our team to do the Chairman's Awards. So anyone that was interested in doing it would pretty much be on the chairman's team. More recently, we've had some people step up and really want to push the process forward more. So generally, our process is the core leadership of our team, which is myself, Mike Corsetto, our team captain, and our team vice captain. That core leadership usually has a pretty strong say in who the other leadership roles are. So we would select a chairman's lead, usually self-nominated or nominated by someone else. And then that chairman's lead works with us to find other suitable people to fill in the chairman's team. Our chairman's team isn't that great. Sorry. Our chairman's team isn't that large. It's a great team. But we only have about maybe 6 people on the team, which is probably small compared to some other teams, chairman's teams. But that's basically the process. It's not very involved at this point. We have a much more involved process with selecting our travel team and our core leadership team.
I just want to jump in, by the way. I'm sorry, chat. We've restricted apparently to only subscribers chatting. So that is lifted now, and everybody else should be able to chat. Sorry about that. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. So to pick up where Steve left off, we have a little bit different approach to chairmans. Our chairman's team, if you will, it starts with the whole team, and that's sort of there's a bit of history there in terms of our survival. We're not based at a school. We're a community-based team, and so in order to get membership and sponsorship, we had to recruit everybody onto the non-robot side of the team. The way we get down sort of to who our chairman's presenters are and who's I'll say the face of our chairman's process. Really, the students sort of bubble up to the top based on that starting foundation of everybody doing chairmans. And what we really look for among the leadership of the team, to Steve's point, he has Mike and a couple other folks, and I have a similar crew that works with me and backs me up. We look for kids who, first of all, have really embraced the team history and the culture of the team. And then we're looking for the students who can be good communicators. We typically have something on Friday nights that we call Fun Fridays, where we play game shows and have trivia to get kids up to get them plugged into what the team's all about, what we've done in the past. And we look for the great communicators and the kids who sort of have a bit of charisma and really like to engage in that process. And typically, it's not that hard to find your three kids to champion the team and be the kids that get put forward in that role.
Let me ask you guys, so something I wanted to talk about maybe is a little bit of the culture of the Chairman's Award. And that's something when you go with teams that There are some teams that we know that are all about the robot, and that's what they focus on, and they're not looking at much else. But as we know, chairman's obviously not just from being able to qualify for championships to be a Hall of Fame team, but just from an altruistic perspective, chairman's is a very important thing to the culture first. How do you guys, how do you get students engaged and want to be in chairman's and get them like, this is absolutely what I want to do, and they feel like they're an important part of the team by doing so?
You want me to go first, or
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve.
It's actually, I'll be honest, it's a challenge for us. I mean, we have focused a lot on our competitive side, but we consider our team to consist of three main pillars, which is our competition, our education, and our outreach. So we want to do outreach. We want to share our knowledge and experience with as many teams as we can and help them get better. But when you look at what it's taking now to be a successful Chairman's Award team, I think it's a challenge for us anyway. We don't live in a disadvantaged community, so we don't have the opportunity to go. I mean, maybe we do, but we haven't done enough to do that and go out to other communities maybe around us where there's a lot of disadvantaged students. So the culture is, we're trying to develop that culture among our students. We're trying to make it important to do outreach, but I would say it is a challenge for us. Sure. And we look to teams like Mike's team, 31-32 are an amazing example of a team that has done so much, and we try to follow their role.
Thanks, Steve. It's a little overwhelming to hear you say something like that. So, but in one sense, we had it easy. Look, when we got here and set up the one team, we had nothing, and we counted everything that we got as a gift from the first community. To be honest, I mean, we had my old team 2342 ship over their rookie robot. We had teams. I don't want to say teams all across the world, but we had teams in Hawaii like 368, 359, 3008 really reach out and help us get over the hump that first year. We had an awful lot of help. So in setting up that culture that Steve's talking about, we could directly point to specific acts of gracious professionalism that not just made our team better, but made our team possible. I mean, without some of that help that we received in those early years, we simply would not have had a team. And then, so it's really easy to create a culture, and I say easy in quotes, it's a lot of work, but it was easier to create a culture from that point on of, hey, somebody paid it forward so you kids could do this. Yeah. Now it's your turn to turn around and make that happen. And just to build on that, when the kids realized that, hey, these are teams that are helping us halfway around the world, and they don't have to do it because, they need to focus resources on the robot or whatever. But in order for you to now turn around and pay that back, it's going to take a whole heap of more work. It really redoubled the effort and commitment on the part of the students because it was going to be that much harder. So it was relatively easy to get students heavily bought in to making the first community better, making the first community stronger. And that culture is something that the students themselves have enforced 8 years down the road now. And I see it in other teams as well on the robot side. There's a culture there of excellence. And once you have that culture started, you want to do everything to protect it and further it. And the students are the best people at doing that because they're the ones who are directly benefiting from it. They live the impact, and they're the ones having all the fun. So wherever you see excellence in an FRC program across the board, you can always look at the students and you can see that they're the ones enforcing that culture and continuing it.
Awesome. Thanks for that insight from both you guys. Let's move on here and bring in our first caller for today, which is going to be Warren Reynolds from Team 6508, Loco in Port Macquarie. I'm going to pronounce that wrong, sorry, in Australia. He can correct me on it. So 6508 is a rookie team and part of the Robotics in the Outback project. Warren, welcome on to First Help Now. What's your question for today?
We were just wondering if you're able to build your own custom controller to connect to the driver station to control the robot. So yeah, just sort of trying to think outside of the square of just using the joystick, whether it's possible to emulate a joystick with something and connect it up, and are we allowed to do that?
Yeah, let's have you stick on too, because I'd love to hear what your responses or what your thoughts are about their idea. So, Steve, do you want to start out?
Yeah, this is not really my expertise, but my understanding is you can use any joystick. We use a Ferrari racing wheel, and we've tried different joysticks. I'm sure you can build your own joystick. I think the requirements from first are that you use their brain, and the way you transmit to that is up to you, your choice. I believe that's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike.
Yeah, sorry.
So as long as we emulate a joystick, the driver station is happy to take those inputs, and then we're all okay, sort of thing. So there's no other technical challenges, as long as we can appear to be a joystick.
Well, I wouldn't say there's no other technical challenges. Certainly, you're going to need some robustness. So we've tended to use for the driver station the Logitech joysticks, and we flip flop all over the place. I'll say for the operator. Last year we went with the fully custom button box, which had some nice buttons and switches and a few pots on it, potentiometers, and I don't know if Steve experienced this much, but in the autonomous part of the game, oftentimes people went ramming into the wall, and it was it was quite possible to get your entire driver station to fall off. And so besides the mapping technology on the software side, you want to make sure you're doing a really good job of robustness, not just because you have high school students handling things and sometimes not paying attention about this, that, or the other thing. There's more important things to check out, or they get distracted, but just in the course of the game, it's possible that whatever you're using could get roughed up a bit. And so you want to look into making those solutions robust, because the last thing you want is to have your students sitting there and pushing a button and it's just not happening because a switch went bad or you had a cold joint in your soldering or whatever.
So I'm going to jump in here on something too. For controllers, and I believe as somebody mentioned, you have to use the brain for it. So I think you have to use some sort of USB in, I would assume, in order to connect to the ports that are on that laptop, on the Classmate, if I'm correct. So with that said, though, there are a lot of options you can do for something like that. I saw Nicholas in chat. So they use a Guitar Hero controller. I know that one year when I was on 2826, we actually built this kind of the control board with almost like a disc jockey record player thing to control the axis of a turret. So there's a lot of cool options you can, just like that, right? So there's a lot of cool options you can do with something like that. But to Mike's point, to add in, that's not just last year where robots have slammed in from autonomous too, and it's something that every single year that I see as an MC perspective on the field, that teams just so your Velcro's your friend. There's Velcro right on the driver station, so no matter what you have, you should be Velcroing that and doing dual lock into the driver station itself. And robustness is really key with that. The biggest thing I'd say though too is think about the functionality of it. When you take a step back and you think about how intuitive something might be to create, in many cases, we've used Xbox 360 controllers, and the kids are used to that. They know how to control it. They know how to operate it. And while for example, not to knock on Nick from 701, because I don't know how it worked out, but a Guitar Hero controller sounds really cool, but is it practical for what you really need? And is something else going to accomplish that in an easier fashion? It really comes down to what your objectives are. Do you want to just build a cool controller, or do you want something that's going to be truly functional on your robot?
Yeah, I just want to go ahead, Steve.
And robustness, I think. I mean, and I think that what I would say to any rookie team is, I mean, it sometimes is fun to go try new things and do things yourself. But if there's a controller, if there's a joystick that already works really well, I would just recommend using that. It's a little bit like build a kit bot or build a very simple tank drivetrain. In your rookie year, you don't want to be doing a swerve drive. So maybe in your rookie year isn't the year to make a creative, control system. Just use something that already works.
Let me ask, with the question that you asked, what do you have in mind? What are you interested in doing? I should have asked that first.
It was a bit like what you said there earlier with the turntable idea, like a record DJ turntable thing. So you can actually just spin something and then read angle sensors and read gyros and just have the robot face the direction you want it to face. So basically just a continuous potentiometer or a digital encoder. and then feed that in as a joystick input. So it's just one of the ideas one of the kids come up with, and I thought, yeah, it's got merit. Yeah.
And it definitely does, and there's nothing wrong with trying it. It's just that one of the big things, as I'm sure all of us and veterans in FRC have learned, is that there's just that ratio between how much time do you spend on something versus the practicality of it. And it could turn out really cool and work out really well. And, we don't want to shoot down your student's idea by any means, but it just comes down to, what if you think long term, and this kind of goes with the strategy when you're thinking about your robot, what's not going to be cool, what's going to be effective usually ends up better for you in many cases.
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to close off one thing that you mentioned, Tyler, because you're talking about Guitar Hero.
Sure.
One of the things I want to make sure that's clear is that that you do have to be tethered to that classmate or that laptop through the USB port. So you cannot use Bluetooth. You'll create huge problems if you're connecting wirelessly.
Well, you just can't do it anyway. I don't think it's allowed in the rules, but you wouldn't want to do that. I mean, the more wired you can be, the better off you are, right?
Yeah, and you really don't want the student who's invested all that time on that really cool thing to show up at the event and find out that it's not within the rules to do it. And
the good news is progression tells us, based on the last couple of years, that robots are going to get so small in FRC in about 5 years. We're actually going to go back to the maze craze controllers, and everything's going to be tethered anyway, so we're good to go, right? So.
I didn't realize this was a comedy show, Tyler.
Well, every show is a. Well, if you want to call it comedy, I'll go with that. All right, hey Warren, okay. Thanks a lot for coming on. Anything else you wanted to ask before we let you go?
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah.
Alrighty, well, thank you very much for coming on. And once again, if you're interested in coming on our show in future, go ahead and email frchoupnow@gmail.com. Thanks again, Warren.
Thanks a lot. Warren. See ya.
See you, Warren.
And we always have a little bit of an interesting transition here as we go through. So hopefully our producer, Nick, is really good at working on the fly for things. But we'll keep moving on while he's doing that. Mike, what's our next question we're moving into?
I actually can't see the questions, Tyler. Can you? Sorry about that.
Yep. Do you have the doc page?
Yeah, let me get it up here.
I'll put it in Skype for you. Our next question, though, comes from a First Help Now question and asks, what are different ways that teams can qualify for world championships? So we might not need everybody to answer this, but
yeah. So historically, it's been the Winning Alliance, Rookie All-Star, Chairman's Award, and Engineering Inspiration. And this year, brand new, we have the ability to make it through the wild card, I guess, or was it the Captain of the Finalist Alliance? Yeah.
Yes. So the Captain of the Finalist Alliance automatically is generated as a wild card.
Yeah. So we'll be sending 7 potentially from each regional, and I think there's a cascade of where it goes from there. Sort of like what happens in the event of government disruption with a presidential presidential replacement.
I was going to ask, are you guys even allowed to come in this country anymore? But we won't get too political. we won't get too political. That will happen.
Right.
So. Yeah. Steve, can you think of any other ways in regards to
I assume you mentioned Rookie All-Star. So I just want to, if you did, I'm sure you did, re-emphasize that for a rookie team, this is a great opportunity because there aren't that many rookie teams at any particular regional, so your competition isn't that high. So I would strongly recommend to any rookie team to do a good job of looking at what it takes to win the Rookie All-Star, and you're going to represent your team better that way anyway. So definitely go for that one.
So one thing I want to mention too, and this got asked, is what a wild card is or what a wild card is for. So wild cards in general are they're generated when a team has already qualified for championships and another opportunity comes up. So for example, this year, if you are the Captain of the Finalist Alliance, you are automatically you get a wild card no matter what. That does not matter. There are 2 to 3 extra potential wild cards, depending if there's 3 or 4 robots in the alliance, if I remember correctly, 2 for sure. And those are generated. So like, let's say, for example, you have a Hall of Fame team that comes like 16 bomb squad comes to your regional. They've already qualified for championships. Therefore, they actually automatically generate another slot for somebody else to go. Or let's say that a team is attending their 2nd regional event, and this is much more regional focus than how districts work. So keep that in mind as well. But let's say a team comes to your district, they've already won, or your regional, I'm sorry, they've already won an event. They are already going to championships, therefore they generate an extra spot. In that case, then it becomes the first pick of the Finalist Alliance gets a spot, and then the second pick of the Finalist Alliance would get a spot. And somebody can correct me, I do not remember if there's a backup robot on the Finalist Alliance, if they generate a wild card or not. Either one of you guys know?
I do not know that.
Yeah, it used to be that it would get cut off after a certain level, so they wouldn't go all the way down the list. I think it was only the captain of the alliance, the captain of the Finalist Alliance was invited, but then it just terminated there.
No, it's been first and second pick.
Oh, has it? Okay.
Yeah, I just don't remember if it's a backup robot or not.
But you actually brought up a couple other ways, Tyler, that teams can qualify. And I'm not saying this is something that people can get up at the beginning of the season and put down as a goal for their team. But the Hall of Fame teams qualify, for example, year after year. And I think Engineering Inspiration qualifies for to go back again if they win a championship.
Yeah, and if you win EI at Champs the previous year, or you've won at a event for EI. For once again, this is non-district events, so keep that in mind. Then you do. Yep. Or if you won Champs last year, then you get to go. So you still gotta pay. You still gotta pay, but that's the one thing to keep in mind too, teams, is that even if you qualify for championships, unless you win EI, and they have not announced that or confirmed that yet this year, you still have to pay for Champs, which is $5,000. So as a team going in, and this is maybe something for another time, if your team qualifies, you should have a plan to go to Champs before you qualify for Champs. And it doesn't mean you have to have the money, but I guarantee you things are going to become ridiculously hectic for you, and just doing a GoFundMe is not enough, and it shouldn't be enough. You as a team need to have a good plan on what you're going to do for fund development so you have an opportunity to go to World Champs.
Yeah, and now you have to have a plan for if you win at Champs as well.
Well, apparently not, because I don't know if they define what First Festival Champions really is.
They haven't actually defined it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the World Champs or the Super Champs, or if it's just an exhibition. But we'll let first qualify what that is in a little bit, and don't get me started on the actually not in a bad way, but the new First program that is apparently completely separate from First, and how that will work out, which actually is exciting. Another time to move on. So next are robot specific questions, and this question is about, as I just lost my spot there,
fabricating sheet metal.
Yeah, that's right. So what does that team write, Mike?
So what they wanted to know is they're starting to make some sheet metal parts for the first time this year. So brand new territory for this team. We feel that lightning holes, and I can only means that they're pocketing their metal somehow. I like that term, lightning holes.
You haven't heard that?
Well, our team's Thunder Down Under, so we would maybe call them thunder holes. I don't know.
That means something else in the States, by the way. I'm not sure if you knew that.
Yeah, we know that.
All right, and, moving on.
We tend not to talk about it. That's okay. There's that comedy show again.
Yes.
Anyway, getting back to the question, Tyler, we feel that the lightning holes would be helpful and also make our robot look professional. We're having trouble figuring out how to make aesthetic cuts while still being structurally sound. Where can we start our process?
Well, the first thing I would say is function over form. So I'm a big advocate of that. So if your goal is to make something pretty, I would rethink maybe whether that is truly what you want to do. So, I mean, if your goal is to make something that's structurally sound, but while you're doing it, also make it pretty, then I'm okay with that. But let's not put one before the other. Other than that, we are not a team that uses sheet metal. We haven't gone into that area yet. There are teams like 971, I think 118, 148. These teams have used sheet metal, and I would probably refer to them. I would ask them what they do.
So I'll jump in a little bit here. So on 2826, for many years, we used sheet metal, and we were gracious enough to have fortunate enough to have a sheet metal laser fab actually do all of our laser fab cutting for us, which was fantastic. We don't have that anymore, so we had to switch to box tubing. But when we did, with the sheet metal in general, as you mentioned, always functionality over form. However, there are actually, one of the things I'd say is you should be catting this stuff out, because putting stuff into Inventor or SolidWorks will help answer a lot of these questions for you, and doing stress tests on these as well too. But you can actually, with sheet metal, it is a very durable material overall. Not pliable is a little bit different, but you can cut some pretty intricate designs and something like that and still keep the right form and functionality that you want for something like that. So there are a lot of options out there in regards to what kind of holes you can cut, what kind of designs you can cut in. But I mean, I'll tell you, from being on 2826, I mean, we put in some pretty intricate designs. We actually would laser cut in our own logo right into the robot chassis itself. So you can still keep something very durable with sheet metal. It's just like I said, you should be catting it up. That will answer a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, one of the things we just started doing sheet metal in terms of cutting out significant bits and pieces here and there in the last year or so. But one of the things you got to keep in mind is not all, and I'll use the Australian term, not all aluminium is created equal. So there are different grades of material, and you need to be aware of what material you're actually using. So if you're using 6000 series, which we can't actually get over here, or versus 5000 series, it's going to have different strength to weight ratios, and that's going to determine how much metal you actually going to want to cut out. The other thing you need to be aware of is that sheet metal is not so good in terms of torsional strength. It's really good in terms of compression and tension. So you really want to think about, if you're going to start cutting things out, how it's going to limit that all-important strength that you're trying to get out of it, and in which directions and which forces you're trying to mitigate or transmit through that member.
So one thing I want to bring up too, that our producer Nick brought up, and he has a lot of experience with sheet metal, is that one of the good patterns, and we've done this on 2826, is using an ISO grid pattern, which he's going to bring up on the screen here. This is a really, really good option for structural integrity, that you can lightning hole and gut out a lot of your weight. It's nearly half the weight, if I remember correctly, and you can still keep something that's very structural and strong.
Yeah, so just looking at this pattern there, if you look at that and think about how that's going to operate in tension and in compression, you can see that the places where you're leaving the metal are creating force lines to transmit the forces along those dimensions. Because you're talking about a plane, there's nothing that's going to stop it from doing this sort of thing. And the more material you remove, the easier it's going to do that. So you want to make sure that the edges of that are pinned down really good. That whatever you're pinning it down to will keep it from doing that torsional thing.
All right, Mike, why don't you move on with our next question here? We'll keep rolling on.
Okay, we are first-year team, and we are thinking about using pneumatics to grab the gear. What do we need to know about using pneumatics to accomplish this task? And
so, Steve, do you do a lot with pneumatics at all?
We use a lot of pneumatics, yeah. So the first thing to think about with motion, so you're talking about moving something here between using pneumatics versus motors, is that pneumatics are designed to move something from point A to point B. I mean, that's essentially how they work. So if your mechanism only needs two positions, like an intake would be a classic example. An intake roller, you're going to lift it up out of the way, and then you're going to put it down to intake. That's a classic example of where pneumatics can be very effective. If you're trying to design a mechanism that's going to have variable positions, like, for example, our shooter last year, or our elevator that moved the shooter to different positions, then you need to think about using motors. They both have their advantages. The downside of pneumatics is that you've got to obviously have a bunch of compressed air on your robot, or have a compressor, and that can be a problem. The advantage of pneumatics is that they're pretty light, so compared to motors. So, yeah, I mean, pretty much that's all I would say on the topic. It's definitely a way to go.
I guess that everything that Steve said, I would agree with entirely. When I put it in the framework of a rookie team, my biggest concern is that there's so many things for the team to get their arms around in the first place. I mean, just trying to understand the motors and the relationship with the motor controller, and how that all ties into the control system. When you throw in having to learn the pneumatics on top of that, it's just a whole nother level of complexity that for a rookie team may be a bit too much. And I think the question that we have here is from a rookie team. So I'd be a bit concerned about them jumping into pneumatics, especially this late in the season. If they had done a pneumatic project off season and gotten their arms around the different components of an FRC, a legal FRC pneumatic system, and they had that under their belt, then I would say, yeah, go ahead. It's a great way to do things, as Steve said, with two positions. But if your first introduction to FRC was picking up your kit at kickoff, and you opened it up and saw pneumatics in there and thought it was Christmas morning, I would say, why don't you save that for an off-season project, get it under your belt when you have plenty of time, Use all the resources that are available to you online on the FRC website, through Chief Delphi, through First Help Now, and do that as an off-season project so you have that in your back pocket as you go into the next build season.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of build on to what Mike was saying in regards to pneumatics, and a couple things too. Is with pneumatics, there's a lot more planning, in my opinion, that goes on, because you got to think about the accumulators. You got to think about how fast, if you are depleting your accumulators, how quickly are they going to refill back up? They're going to take up a lot of space potentially, especially as accumulators taking up a lot of space. The good news is weight-wise have become drastically down. For those of you who have been around for a while, we didn't used to have plastic accumulators for things, and they used to take up way more weight than they used to. But yeah, I would agree. As a rookie team, if you haven't started now, I would caution in regards to doing something like that. There can be a lot of benefits to it, but think about it. It's a whole new subsystem you're adding onto your robot, which potentially means if you don't have enough time to iterate on it and figure out where the bugs are ahead of time, those are potential issues you're going to deal with the competition.
Yeah, and just for our international teams who might be listening, the requirements to go with the 1/4 NPT really can challenge you in terms of finding local parts. I guess I would recommend, if you are an international team listening to this, that you do your best to go with the 1/4 NPT, because when you get to that event, wherever it might be, and you need a spare part or something, most of the teams who are there are going to have those imperial-based parts rather than something that's metric-based.
Absolutely. All right, so we do have a few questions from the audience that were tuned in that we do want to check out on here. So the first one is going to be from Dark Zach, by the way, who is our first official subscriber on the channel. We just got approved for Twitch partnership, and we're working out the details about getting emojis and about getting subscriber benefits and that sort of thing. But if you do a Twitch Prime, we would really appreciate you. You actually get a free subscription to us. All you have to do is hit subscribe and link your account. Or if you don't, you can subscribe to us for $4.99, and we're going to have a lot of benefits coming through with that. We appreciate your support. And he asks, how do you select your travel team if you're a big team? So if you're going, I'm going to use the Hawaiian Kids for an example. 359 in many cases in the past has traveled to many events. They don't always bring their full team. So, Mike, this might be a good question for you, and Steve, I don't know if you have a follow-up, but Mike, I'll have you start because you guys travel a lot in what you do. How do you choose what students go where?
Yeah, that's a really great question. The basis, again, going back to what I was saying before about chairmans, the culture of our team is that everybody's on the chairman's team, and everybody's required to clock up volunteer hours in our outreach program. And so in order to qualify for travel team, you have to have reached a threshold in terms of your volunteerism. The second thing we do is we're actually a self-funded team. So we run something called Robo Camps that raises all the money for our team operation. The students staff that themselves, and they earn money towards their travel by putting in hours on Robo Camps. So sort of it's a 50-50 model. For the students get some money towards their travel budget, and the team gets some money for operations. So once you have a student who's clocked up their volunteer hours, they've got enough money in their travel budget to fund it. Then the third thing is roles and responsibilities. So have you demonstrated the expertise necessary to fill a critical role on our travel team? And pretty much at that point, it's easy to go down the list and say, yes, 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 no, yes, yes, yes. And that's pretty much how we staff our travel team.
Steve, do you guys travel a lot?
Well, we have been traveling to a couple of regionals a year. I mean, our regionals are pretty close, so it's mostly just driving, but we've qualified for champs since 2011, so we've obviously traveled to champs all those years. So yeah, we have a travel team, and it used to be 20, and we've actually decided to up it to 36 this year. So so we have to think about this.
And you guys have about 100 students on your team, right?
We currently have about 100 contracted students, and probably more like 70 that are showing up on a regular basis. Wow. So similar to Mike, I mean, we definitely look at our actual selection process is fairly convoluted now, and the final selection comes down to our core leadership, which is myself, Mike Corsetto, team captain and vice captain, that make the final decisions. But we have a nomination process. Each of our sub-team leaders nominates people from their sub-team that have met certain criteria, the same kind of criteria Mike's talking about. We fill the key technical roles on the team first, so like the drive team, the pit crew, media people, etc. And then the rest is scouting. And so this year we're going to actually have a pretty good group of scouts, probably as many as 18 scouts, and then a scout leader. And
you're gonna have more scouts than what people have on their team.
Yeah, I know.
That's awesome.
It's not my idea. It's Corseto's idea.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'd do the same thing.
Corseto's a genius, Steve.
Yeah.
Yes, he is. I agree. That's why I'm not arguing. So the scouting, the criteria for scouts is a little different because they're not filling the same technical role. We're looking for people that are committed, people that are willing to listen to directions and are careful in what they do. So it's slightly different criteria, but yeah, basically the same as Mike. And it's not. I wouldn't say it's an easy process. Mike sort of made it sound like it's just zip zip zip. You just pick people. There's usually, when we get down to the last 3 or 4 scouts that we have to pick, there's usually a good pool of people that are all really qualified, and it's a tough decision to make, and it does upset people when they don't get on the team. So yeah, it's tough.
I guess if that's a question from a mentor, also there's the added dimension, and I don't know how it works in different school districts or different countries, but there's a duty of care also, in that you're not going to have a 1-to-1 ratio of an adult watching over a student. So there's an element of selecting a travel crew that's going to allow you to safely manage those kids and sort of ensure the social contract you have with the mom and dad, that you're taking good care of their kids and that they're going to be safe and have a good time. So that's something else that we factor into the consideration. There's certainly in the past on our team been students who are highly qualified for different roles, but we had to have a second think about that duty of care issue.
So I'll chime in from what we had on Wave Robotics, and I think we approach things maybe a little bit differently. We have essentially thresholds that students have to meet in order to attend competition, and the honest truth behind it is that when we take a coach bus, we want it as full as possible, because that means it's also as cheap as possible for something like that, right? But what we do essentially is we have a couple main thresholds that students have to do. We do have grade requirements for our students. So they do have to pass their grade requirements in order to travel with the team, because grades, we stress that really hard. Like, grades are super important, are the #1 priority, on the team. We also have required community service hours, and they have to be Wave Robotics specific hours. So it can't just be, I went and did something. It's, I went and actually did something with the team. So I did a demonstration or a presentation, that sort of thing. And then we also have required work hours for students. So students have to put in so many hours during build and post-build in order to travel with the team as well. So that's the way that Wave has done it.
Sounds like a pretty solid method.
Thanks. I think it's worked out. It's worked out pretty well. There's always problem with thresholds, though, is that there are the students who do the bare minimum, but we set the bare minimum at a point that we feel that's enough in order to get a student to go, right? All right, we're going to just do one more question because we're going to end up wrapping up here. I'm going to rephrase this question a little bit, but Rooster2655 has asked, what do you think? He's basically said, "How screwed are you?" But what do you think about if you're still using Mecanum at this point? If excellent maneuverability is assumed. So we'll kind of rephrase that. What do you guys think about using Mecanum for this year's game in particular? And it's Mecanum, not Mechanum, by the way.
Steve, you want to go first? Why don't you go?
Everybody wants to defer.
Don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it. Yeah.
I mean, we've used a West Coast drivetrain in as many years as I can remember competing in this competition. We look at not all, but almost all of the best teams in FRC, and they've used West Coast drivetrains in almost all of the years that I can remember the competition. I guess my point of view is there doesn't seem to me too much of a downside to a West Coast drive. It works in almost every situation that we've used it in. So if a team wants to experiment with a different kind of drive base, and Mecanum, is that how it's pronounced? Mecanum. I'm sorry.
Sorry, from Andy Baker. So
I've always said Mecanum, but Mecanum. If a team thinks that they can, get an advantage using it, then by all means experiment. But the data shows, I think, the statistics show that a West Coast drive is, in my opinion, the way to go. So I'm sorry, I'm biased.
Oh, you're good, man. Mike,
Yeah,
how do you feel about it?
Yeah, so we've built 3 different drivetrains for competition. We've done our traditional sort of double supported axle, so not quite a West Coast drive. It's not cantilevered. It's supported
Can I
on 2
interrupt real
ends.
quick, Mike? Can you describe what a West Coast drive is, by the way, just so our audience can get that?
Yeah, so Steve is probably better at it than I am, but basically it's your axle's cantilevered. You have a wheel hanging out there on an axle. It's not supported on 2 ends, effectively. There's all different variations of it.
I think if I were to describe the typical one, if we look at a 6-wheel West Coast drive, is typically you have wheels that are typically equidistant to each other, and you have your middle set of wheels dropped, usually like pretty small amount, like 1/8 or 1/4 inch lower than what your front and back wheels are. And what that does for you is when you are either moving forward or backwards, it's going to tilt the robot in that direction and give you typically a square base, which makes you really maneuverable, and you don't get scrubbing on something like that. But it still gives you all the power, or pretty darn close to the power of having 6 wheels on the ground and the traction.
Yeah, maybe I should just back up a bit and say when I say West Coast drive, I mean any 6 or maybe 8-wheel tank drive that is not cantilevered, that's just supported by rails on either side of the wheels, I think is great too, like the Kitbot. I'm not saying that wouldn't be a good drivetrain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying if you're going to experiment with a drivetrain that's different than a Kitbot or a very standard chassis, then why not experiment with West Coast drive rather than something more radical? I don't know.
Yeah. So we actually built a Mechanum robot for Recycle Rush, and that's the one that did really well for us. But I'm with Steve. Recycle Rush was a very special game because the 2 different alliances never got to play with against each other, bumping each other, except for the can battles, and that's clearly the exception rather than the rule. So sort of to Steve's point, if you go back and you look through the history of FRC, there's huge amounts of video that you can watch with these different drivetrains, whether it's Swerve or Mechanum or West Coast Drive or what have you. And you can see the performance of the robots. There's a huge amount of data out there, as Steve says. But the bottom line is, what is your strategy, and what sort of requirements does that strategy put on your drivetrain? And instead of, in Australia, we have a saying, horses for courses. So what horse do you want to put on the field given what it is the course demands? And there's going to be, I agree wholeheartedly with Steve, there's very few games where if you did the benefits and risks of a Mechanum drivetrain, there's very few games where Mechanum's going to exceed West Coast Drive or drop center wheel designs more than it's going to benefit you.
Nice there for a second.
Great in that video.
Thank you, by the way. Yeah. That was that's Wave's drivetrain this year, actually.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. It updates every single year. So one thing I do want to mention, and by the way, for those in chat, because we have a couple different audiences, those who we want to educate a little bit more, and those who know everything for this, please realize we are oversimplifying some things on these. But yeah, when it comes to Mechanum, there are a couple teams who do it really well. They're out there. Nightcrawler, Swart Dogs, I'm sure a couple others that are not coming to the top of my head. They do that really, really well. However, I 100% agree with Steve that, to me, in most cases, you can accomplish what you want to do with a tank drive or a West Coast drive. And here's my opinion on that, is that if you think about all the weight savings and all the time you save and everything else that you can focus on other mechanisms on your robot, train your drivers better. That's my opinion, is that a lot of these teams, especially when they go Mechanum, our producer Nick mentioned that most teams use Mechanum as an expensive tank drive, and that's, I think, very true in many cases. But when it comes to that, give your drivers a lot of time to train. And if you can do something like a West Coast drive or an easy 4, 6, 8-wheel drive for that, you should have plenty of time for them to train on it. And I think that's going to produce better results than typically what a Mechanum drive would for something like that. And in regards to holonomic motion, I mean, you could look at doing something like an H drive or something like that, where you have use Omni wheels or something like that. I'm much more for the West Coast drive. I think overall the simplicity, the form, and the functionality of it is just going to give you typically what you need most years. And if you give your drivers enough repetitions, enough practice on something, you should be able to accomplish what you need to do personally with the West Coast.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Tyler. One of the things that brings up is too many teams invest too much time in the technology on the robot and not enough time on the practice. And some of the things that Mecanum can buy, you can accomplish by just training your drivers better. But oftentimes we get enamored with the technology and building a different or better robot than we did the previous year.
Yeah, and the other thing is that I think Tyler alluded to this. He was talking about driver practice, but you also mentioned other mechanisms. And if you spend most of your build season developing this fancy drivetrain and never get to the real guts of your robot, which is all the mechanisms that are actually going to play the game, then I don't think I think you're really cutting off your nose to spite your face. I think you should. I mean, our goal is to get our drivetrain built in the first 2 weeks. So we do the same drivetrain pretty much every year. We get it built, we get it running, we start running our auto routines. So we're ahead of the game, you know, and then we can start actually focusing on the mechanisms, which I think is more important.
All right, so that is going to be it for today's show, Fun Nation. Thank you so much for tuning in. Steve Harvey from Citrus Circus, the legendary 1678 and probably the new Kings of Einstein. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I got to ask you, by the way, I don't think we cannot not ask, what's going on with 1670 and their robot this year? Let's hear all the juicy tidbits, all the strategies. I want to hear exactly what you're doing, every single little bolt. Go for it.
Well, 1678 has decided this year that we're not going to shoot balls at all.
Okay.
And gears, same thing. It's just I don't think it's worth doing gears.
Okay.
So we're building a completely defensive robot.
Yes.
And I think we're probably not going to have time to develop a climber either. So we're just going to work on defense. Defense is the way to win the game.
Yes, with West.
It's all about defense.
And you're using a Mecanum drive. You changed your mind.
We'll be testing it. We'll be trying it.
Okay,
Steve, it sounds like you guys have found a loophole in the rules, because I heard something about autonomous getting up and running already and defense in your strategy. So yeah, is there something you want to share about how to do autonomous defense?
Why do you think I'm sitting here looking so relaxed? We're done.
Been done for a week and a half. But hey, man, what is going on with 1678, and where can people find out more about you guys?
Well, in terms of what we're doing this season, I mean, that's we're not going to reveal exactly what we're doing. Yeah. We're working hard. If you want to contact us, I think you guys have our website. I think you were going to put that up at the end. We'd be happy to help any team that needs help. You know, we give advice all the time. And we'll see you at Sacramento. We'll see you at Madera, and we'll see you in Las Vegas.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can always check out Citrus Circuits on Facebook and Twitter as well. And yeah, if you haven't checked it out, it's citruscircuits.org. Sorry, we were trying to throw that up. Didn't look like we were able to there. But yeah, citruscircuits.org. And if you guys are familiar with them, absolutely amazing, phenomenal team. They have some of the most amazing mentors on their team and amazing students too. I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of them at championships, very passionate group. And Steve, I'm sure that's a lot of thanks to you and your awesome leadership on that team. So thanks for being an inspiration in first.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Yeah, man. Mike Heimlich. Oh man, I'm going to pronounce it. How do you say it one more time?
Heimlich.
Heimlich. I was going to say Heimlich.
The maneuver.
I know, right?
Maneuver.
He actually invented it. Hey man, awesome job on piloting this show. Hope you had a lot of fun. What's going on with First Australia and Thunder Down Under right now?
Well, the Rito program's in full swing. We have a whole bunch of people out on the road, crisscrossing Australia, getting our rookie teams up and running, which makes us a little bit thin on the ground here in Sydney. But it'll all be worth it at our two regionals this year, the Southern Cross and the South Pacific regionals in week 3, I believe it's going to be. So we're a bit thin right now with lots of people out on the road. Yeah.
And your events are midweek this year, right?
We have one that starts on a Monday, and then we have the traditional, if you will. It's in its 3rd year, following right on the heels of that, so we don't have to break down that event. We have the arena rented for almost a solid week.
And here's the ultimate question: what year are you guys going districts?
Well,
Israel did it. Come on.
If First had their way, everybody would go district. The problem for us is geography.
Yeah.
We're the size of the lower 48, and we have 24 million people. So it's really hard to get a regional up and running anywhere. But if you start sprinkling them around, it gets even tougher.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's a very interesting challenge to deal with. But yeah, great job. And if you guys haven't seen 3132, make sure you look them up. It is still my prediction that they will be the first non-North American team to win Chairman's Championships So yeah, just my respect for you guys goes a long way.
I completely agree.
Yeah. All right, everybody, don't forget that you can follow First Help Now and all of First Updates Now shows under First Updates Now. As mentioned before, we just received Twitch partnership. We do have some awesome benefits down the road coming, so we'd really appreciate it if you subscribe or donate bits to us. It's what's going to keep this show going and keep us running in the future. So thank you, everybody who's done that so far. We really appreciate it, especially our friend, oh man, I'm going to forget his name. It's on Dark as well too for subscribing today. Dark Zach, that's right.
Zach, yeah.
Thanks for subscribing today, buddy. It means the world to us, and you help keep the show going. So thank you very much. We also do have t-shirts available as well. They are on sale right now. Under firstupdatesnow.com. If you go to our web store, we currently have t-shirts with our logo. We have new shirts coming out with other show logos soon, and with our partnership with Twitch, we're going to have a lot more stuff coming. So make sure you check that out. Literally, we don't make any money on it. We just want you to have something, and we just want you to wear it for us and show us on Facebook or Twitter, and we'll get you up on there as well. Big thanks to our producer, Nik Olsen, for stepping in last minute. Literally had to call him away from what he was doing to work on this show. So thank you, Nick, so much for doing another great show. He produces most of our shows for us and always does a fantastic job. If you'd like to leave us feedback, you can do so at feedback@firstupdatesnow.com. We'll be back with First Help Now next week, Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. But step back next week, Monday, for Spotlight, where we're going to discuss using electronic scouting systems. So if you're interested in doing electronic scouting, not just scouting on paper, but making your own program and utilizing it and getting it to work well, tune in next week, Monday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. You can check our website and social media for all of First Updates Now shows. On behalf of myself, Mike, and Nick, I'd like to thank you for tuning in, and thank you once again for all of our moderators in chat, and of course to Steve Harvey for being our fantastic guest today. We'll see you next time on First Updates Now. Talk to you then.
This has been a First Updates Now production. Visit us at firstupdatesnow.com or find us under First Updates Now on Facebook or Twitter.